Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:06. It's O'Connor and Company. Good morning. Thank you so much for being part of what we're doing here and allowing us into your life, whether we're riding shotgun with you right now on your commute or just hanging out in the kitchen or anywhere else in your home or office. We appreciate it, and we've got plenty to get to this morning. Coming up in 30 minutes, Eli Lake, contributing editor for Commentary, talk about how the U.S. bent over backwards to give condolences to the people of Iran after losing their president, the butcher of Tehran. Also coming up at 8:05, Governor Scott Walker, he and Young America's Foundation suing UCLA. We'll tell you all about that. And then at 8:35, Brent Bozell. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, Julie. And joining us right now is Jonna Spilbor, an attorney, legal analyst. JonnaSpilbor.com is where you get the details. Well, Jonna, good morning. Another really interesting day in court yesterday, wouldn't you say?
Interesting is an understatement indeed. Good morning to you both.
So Michael Cohen, the star witness, again, under cross-examination from President Trump's lawyers, not only admitted, as we learned Thursday, that it appears that he lied about that consequential phone call that he says he made to Donald Trump in October, but really now it looks like the phone call was about 14-year-old boy spam calling him and prank calling him. Then yesterday, he admitted that he stole from Donald Trump, which kind of undermines his relationship and what he claims to be a loyal relationship. But also, Jonna, the embezzlement involved here is directly related to the legal fee that is in question, isn't it?
It is. And let me say this. One of my grandfather's favorite sayings when I was a kid was, "A thief may rob you, but a liar will hang you." And it turns out Michael Cohen is both a thief and a liar. And that's what we found out yesterday during the latter part of his cross-examination. So as you correctly pointed out, last week it turns out that the jury got to see, this is really remarkable, the jury got to see a lie unfold from Michael Cohen's lips on cross-examination when he was quizzed about that infamous phone call where he said, almost as if he were Sonny Corleone, he called Donald Trump and said, "It's done. The payment has been done." And that was not the case. Yesterday, we found out that because Michael Cohen was kicked off at the end of his tenure with the Trump organization, that his bonus had been a little bit light. He helped himself to $60,000. Which he was not his to help himself to.
Well,
this is the man, you guys, that the entire case was built on. This sham prosecution was built on the testimony of a man who is not only a liar and also a thief. We cannot get any lower. Bragg's office cannot get any lower than they are at this point.
Now, and sadly, because the testimony in the court proceedings are not televised, I don't know if Trump's defense attorneys made this point, but it seems to me, Jonna, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, because that's why you're here. You're more plugged in on this. But if Michael Cohen was skimming off the top from the payment that Donald Trump allegedly made for Stormy Daniels, and he says, "Okay, Mr. Trump, I need $200,000, right?" Trump pays him $200,000 and writes it as a legal fee, and Cohen keeps part of it and then pays the rest to Stormy Daniels. The fact that he was able to skim off the top and steal from Trump sort of supports the idea that Donald Trump didn't really know the details of what he was paying Michael Cohen for. He was told it was a legal fee. He paid the legal fee. He accounted for it as a legal fee. If he had known the payment was being made to Stormy Daniels for the non-disclosure agreement and all these other things that it's alleged that he knew about, then wouldn't he have also known that Michael Cohen was stealing from him? In a way, I think this really supports his defense.
It's one of many things that supports his defense. So two things that to keep in mind, and I hope the jury will keep this in mind. Even if Donald Trump knew that there was a payment being made to Stormy Daniels, it still doesn't elevate this to any sort of crime whatsoever.
Okay.
It helps. It helps the fact that he was completely in the dark and that Michael Cohen was the one driving the bus is the cherry on top. And remember this, The documentary evidence in support of this non-crime are a series of checks paid to Michael Cohen as legal fees for a period of a year, totaling over $400,000. So this was Michael Cohen continuing to do legal work for Donald Trump and incur expenses, and Donald Trump paying them like you do any lawyer. Lawyer sends you a bill once a month, you pay it. At least that's how it's supposed to go. This was nothing out of the ordinary whatsoever. It certainly isn't. I mean, the first thing the jury is going to have to contend with, you guys, is what is the definition of a legal expense? And they're not going to find that in a statute. New York doesn't define. There's no jury instruction for, hey, this is a legal expense. It has to be this. It has to be that.
Right.
The attorneys are going to have to tell the jury what a legal expense is. Or how about this? Maybe everyone can apply their common sense. And when a lawyer sends you a bill and you're none the wiser that the lawyer is skimming or doing anything untoward and you pay it, you can classify it as a legal expense.
Imagine that. Imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Trump's defense attorneys have asked for orders of dismissal several times.
Yes.
Does this latest evidence, do you think that it adds some weight? Do you think that the judge might consider it? He's dismissed all of the other requests, but do you think it could happen this time? This case is such a clown show at this point.
Yes, I agree with that. And, could the third time be the charm?
Yeah.
Because there were two other motions to dismiss. So if this were, I keep calling this an abnormal trial, if this were a normal trial in a perfect world with a defendant who wasn't famous, with a defendant who wasn't a prior president and probably likely future president, this case never would have seen the inside of a courtroom.
Yeah.
But now here we are. So the judge, he's doing one thing different this time for this third motion than he did in the prior two. He actually took it under advisement, meaning he didn't come out and say, you know what, I'm just going to, out of hand, deny this motion like I've done the other two. He's actually thinking about it. And here's the other thing that I want you to keep in mind. Again, in a, quote, normal prosecution, if a prosecutor puts somebody on the stand and that person is an admitted liar, perhaps committed perjury on the stand, because we didn't talk about this, Bob Costello, a defense witness, has taken the stand to talk about the opposite of what Michael Cohen testified to, meaning it's quite likely he perjured himself on the stand. Any prosecutor worth their salt would make a motion to dismiss this case instantly in the interest of justice. That is a thing. But because this is not a normal prosecution, because this is a sham, because the purpose is not to punish Donald Trump for, let's get Donald Trump off the mean streets of Manhattan. He's such a danger. That's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this was to keep him off the campaign trail and to embarrass him and do all the other things that came about in this trial. So they're not doing that.
Right.
But if Judge Merchan wants to continue to wear that robe after this case, he needs to step up like a real judge and make an honest decision. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. I'm not banking on it, but he does have that opportunity.
Jonna, do you have a few more minutes? Because I have some other questions about where this case is headed, and I know you
I got all the time in the world for you too.
All right. Well, in that case, I'm pleased to announce the beginning of the Jonna Spilbor show here on WMAL. She'll take over starting immediately for the next several hours. We're going to stick with Jonna Spilbor. There's more questions about this trial that we got to get to, what the defense is going to look like, and then the jury instructions from the judge. We'll get to all that in a moment, but first it's 7:15.
He don't even know when he was a vice president. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
And we continue here with Jonna Spilbor. It's Larry and Julie on O'Connor and Company. And Jonna, as we mentioned, Michael Cohen admitted multiple times under oath yesterday that he had embezzled, he had stolen from his client, Donald Trump, or the Trump organization. Talk of cash payments in brown paper bags and things like this. Maybe I've watched too much Perry Mason, but when a witness admits to breaking the law on the stand, when he leaves the courtroom, aren't there usually, police officers there to arrest him because he's just admitted to breaking the law? I mean, what he admitted to is a crime. Why is he not facing any sort of criminal justice?
Yeah, because he's actually a little bit of a smart criminal, and he knows that the statute of limitations for embezzlement has already run. So they can't arrest him. They can't arrest him for that. But what they could arrest him for is perjury, the perjury that happened in real time, as you mentioned with that phone call. He got on the stand and said phone call's purpose was one thing, and then it was proven that it was something else entirely. He took an oath to tell the truth. He lied. That's perjury. They could have walked him out of the court in handcuffs right then and there, but of course they chose not to.
And one other question with regard to that, the perjury as well as the embezzlement that Michael Cohen appears to have either been trapped in the former or admitted to in the latter. Would you categorize those as more serious crimes than falsifying a financial record for a legal payment to a lawyer?
Well, yes, of course. And let's put it this way. Normally, falsifying a business record is considered a misdemeanor, which in this case would have been time barred after 2 years. But what Bragg's office has done is they've elevated it to a felony by alleging, although not in the indictment, not anywhere actually, that the reason for the falsification was to conceal or commit another crime. Yeah. That other crime is still a mystery, you guys. We are 5-6 weeks into this fiasco, and the jury doesn't know, the parties don't know, the judge doesn't, I dare I say the prosecution doesn't even know what crime they're supposed to be landing on in order to elevate this, which is really going to make jury instructions a very interesting and arduous process.
So Trump's defense had started yesterday in a kind of a spectacular way. Who are we going to see up on that? As witnesses for the defense, who do you predict? And any surprises that you think might show up?
No. So I think we're only going to see one more witness. Bob Costello is still on the stand. He was a little bit of a surprise to me, only in that he is an excellent lawyer. He's got very interesting information to provide. I just wasn't sure the team was going to put him up there because, frankly, I don't even think they needed him for this purpose. You know, Trump's team, in my opinion, is winning. They don't need to win more. They just need to win, period. But the second witness that they're going to put up is basically an FEC expert, which the judge has already kind of chopped the legs out from underneath because he's only going to let that expert testify to certain limited things when the whole purpose of bringing this expert is to what I said before. We don't know what this underlying predicate crime is, and this FEC expert is going to testify that whatever they're alluding to isn't even a crime. So to me, that's the final nail in the coffin, but the judge is going to limit his testimony severely. But then I think that's it. Then the prosecution gets a chance to put on a rebuttal case. And frankly, what is there to put on?
Right.
I don't know how they can redeem themselves at this point.
So that brings us to jury instructions from the judge, because a lot of people think, with this testimony, it's like, that's it, slam dunk, he'll get an acquittal or he'll get a hung jury. But I've seen these things play out before, John. I know you have. The judge has a lot of power here and a lot of influence. He gets to tell the jury how to reach their verdict. And what are you going to be looking for during that process?
Okay, so first and foremost, because this is such an unusual case, it is not going to solely be based upon what we call pattern jury instructions. The pattern jury instructions are the tried and true jury instructions that kind of are prepackaged for a variety of penal laws. We don't have that here because of the underlying crime being a mystery to this day. So the first big question mark that the jury is going to contend with is, what is the definition of a legal expense? And why is this important? It's important because the first prong that they're going to have to decide is, was there a falsified business record? Meaning, was this a legal expense that was noted as a legal expense, or was this something else? If they decide that paying your lawyer pursuant to an invoice from your lawyer is actually a legal expense, they don't get to the rest of the questions, you guys. That's it. It's game over. We'll never know. We'll never know what the underlying crime was because the jury won't get there. But if they do get there, how is this judge going to define this underlying crime? It's nowhere. It wasn't in the testimony. It wasn't in the indictment. It's nowhere. So to me, that among the many fatal flaws, that perhaps is the most fatal.
All right, we shall see. Do you think it's possible that the judge, he's taking it under advisement as to whether to never let this go to a jury? Is it possible that the judge will do that based on your observation of the behavior of this judge?
No. The only way this judge does the right thing is if somehow he's had some sort of epiphany or somebody from on high gave him an order to reverse every reversible thing that he's done so far. I mean, he's committed reversible error after reversible error. And look, unless he's going to retire, this judge has a career. This is going to be a big black mark on it, no matter how you slice it. So I think he's going to make it go to the jury, but I do think an across-the-board conviction is not even remotely possible.
Wow.
Hung jury, yes. Acquittal, perhaps. But guilty on all counts, no way. And you heard it here first.
We sure did.
Wow.
And we are going to have you back on to either take a victory lap or explain how badly you got this wrong.
Right. I know. If I have to eat crow, I'll eat crow.
But either way, you've guaranteed a future appearance on O'Connor and Company, also now known as the Jonna Spilbor Show. Thank you, Jonna. Good talking with you. It's 7:24.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:36 now as we charge through this Tuesday morning in your nation's capital. Coming up at 8:05, Governor Scott Walker of Young America's Foundation suing UCLA over their recent behavior after the pro-Hamas encampments. And they actually prevented from having a pro-Israel event. They locked them out of the facility at UCLA. That's just despicable what we're seeing. 8:35. We'll speak with Brent Bozell of Media Research Center. I'm Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
And honestly, the behavior with regard to the lack of moral clarity in the Middle East continues not just on college campuses, but also in the United States State Department. Here's spokesperson Matthew Miller fielding questions from AP reporter Matt Lee, specifically about the statement expressing condolences for the death of the butcher of Tehran.
What exactly is official condolences?
It's a condolences on behalf of the United States government.
Well, then why does it say that? This is like official condolences means absolutely nothing, and I'm not even sure why you're offering condolences if this guy was as bad as you say he was.
Look,
why? I mean,
because we regret any loss of life. We don't want to see people die in helicopter crashes. It doesn't change our view of him. Our view of the regime,
there
but
is not one person that you can think of that the United States didn't want to see in an air accident.
There were people on board that aircraft who have families.
Well, Eli Lake, reporter for the Free Press and host of the Re-Education podcast, and also contributing editor commentary. Aren't you glad the grown-ups are back in charge? But that sounds like the adults really have a handle on our foreign policy, doesn't it?
Well, it's never an easy job, sometimes being a State Department spokesman, but I have to say that I was, I guess, judging on a curve, mildly surprised with the statement because it did include a pretty clear statement about Raisi and his legacy and the damage he's done not only to the Iranian people but across the world. So in that respect, I understand. I mean, it's obviously an embarrassing and almost impossible situation for the spokesman.
Yeah.
But I'm much more concerned about the policy of the administration,
True.
which seems to want to revive the Iran nuclear agreement as opposed to, a press statement where, they're saying,
Sure.
They're offering condolences for a horrible demon.
Can you fill in the blanks here, Eli? I know that listen, we had endless conversations. They didn't feel endless, though. Every conversation with you, Eli, is scintillating and fantastic. I don't want that to come out wrong. But we talked a lot during the Obama administration when they were pushing forward with the Iran nuclear deal. And there's something missing in this equation for me. Has Iran done anything, and I mean anything, in the last 4 decades to demonstrate any level of goodwill to the West, to America, us, the great Satan, that would warrant this kind of acquiescence and bending over backwards to try to accommodate them diplomatically?
Well, they've run a very successful information operation to try to persuade foreign policy elites in Europe and America that their leaders don't really mean what they say, and they had no choice but to sponsor various kinds of terrorism across the world. I would say that there has been a real seduction with the most elite people in what we call our strategic class with opening up Iran. It's the same kind of thing that drove people for years to try to figure out ways to open up to China, which ultimately Richard Nixon did. And there's a similar sense in the case of Iran. The problem is that Iran's leaders have demonstrated time and again that they are liars, and they were lying. And so when we hear and we see this kind of stuff, over and over again, I think what we're really seeing is not the sophistication of our elites, but rather their credulity.
How much also you talk about, Iran has run a sort of good PR campaign here, but there's evidence that there are people sort of the call is coming from inside the house. You've got a member of the White House National Security Council staff who worked for UNRWA. You have some think tank advisors, prominent think tank advisors who are connected to Iran's government, sort of embedded in the U.S. and affecting policy. What role do you think that has in this sort of milquetoast response from the White House, the State Department? I mean, the congressional chaplain, for goodness sake, offered a prayer for this guy. Is that part of the influence here?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's sort of helped lay the groundwork. I mean, and you're referring to the terrific reporting from Jay Solomon for Semaphore.
Yeah.
And one of the most extraordinary things is the International Crisis Group is a widely respected think tank when it comes to foreign policy. Their experts are quoted all the time in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, in the Wall Street Journal. And that organization had a memorandum of understanding with Iran's foreign ministry. That is unbelievable if you think about it. And so I do think that there was a kind of capture of elements of the expert class. On the other hand, they know, I think if you were to talk to Jake Sullivan right now and you were to say, he was on sodium pentothal or something, he was, on a truth-telling drug, he would tell you there is no chance to revive the Iran nuclear deal and that we needed another policy, but they just don't have one because the Democrats under Obama and now Biden put all of their eggs in this basket of, a fever dream. So in that respect, I do think that the veil is lifting a bit, which is, how can you ignore October 7th and whatever you want? I mean, whatever the Iranians knew in detail about it doesn't matter. They trained and funded and encouraged the horrific mass slaughter of Jews that just started a destabilizing war that is kind of very much a regional war when you consider Iran's other proxies in Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. So at this point, I don't think anybody who is with any integrity, who looks at the situation honestly, can think that there can be any kind of entente with Iran at this point. But it is the zombie ideology of the kind of foreign policy elites at this point still.
Eli Lake is our guest. And Eli, could you just, in case, people are just sort of noticing this story and maybe they're hearing the wrong commentary or commentary that doesn't quite sound right with regard to our position with Iran, could you remind people who this man was, President Raisi, the man they called the Butcher of Tehran, what his legacy really is, why this is actually a very good thing for humanity?
Yeah, well, it starts really in, I think it's 1987 or 1988. He presided over, he was basically one of the judges that presided over the mass execution of a number of political prisoners. These were people who had originally joined the revolution in 1979, but they were not Islamists, and they were eventually arrested and persecuted and tortured. And they basically hung about 5,000 of them in one fell swoop. That was Ibrahim Raisi who handed down that verdict, and he's forever been hated. And since then, when he was, he's been president for a few years, he presided over horrific crackdowns against women who were just demonstrating for the right to not wear the hijab or for the right to have their testimony in court be treated as the equal of a man. Basic stuff that we take for granted. and he was responsible. He was the head of the government during that crackdown, although the real power is the supreme leader.
Mm-hmm.
So Raisi is a terrible human being. Obviously, he presided over Iran as Hamas was planning under, with the guidance of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard.
We know October 7th wouldn't have happened without Iran's money, and by extension, sadly, American money in the mix. But do you think October 7th would have happened if Iran didn't give the thumbs up and the green light?
No, but that is, I have to say, a controversial view because if you ask senior people in the U.S. administration and other European governments who, have embassies in Iran, they will say the Iranians were surprised, as was the external leadership of Hamas. I'm skeptical of that. There has been different reporting on this right after October 7th. So, I would just caution that that's my hunch at this point, and I haven't written an article to this extent, but I don't think the Iranians. I don't think it would have happened if the Iranians not given some kind of green light or tacit approval of such a thing.
Well, I'm sticking with Eli's analysis of this over the so-called experts in this town because Eli's the only expert I care about. Eli Lake, always good to talk to you. It's been too long. Don't be a stranger.
Yeah, it has. Please have me back, and I always love to be on the show. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Larry.
Eli. It is 7:45. Right.
Georgia had never had a prosecutorial oversight committee, and all of a sudden 14 minorities were elected to office to serve as district attorney. And now all of a sudden they need an oversight committee to look after district attorneys because they want to tell us how to prosecute and who to prosecute.
That's Fani Willis, of course, on Rachel Maddow last night. Shockingly, I know this is going to sound surprising to you, suggesting that oversight of her conduct, which has been outrageous and illegal based on the testimony we learned, is actually racist. If you want to question how she's doing her job and using taxpayer money to go to her boyfriend so that she can go to trips to Costa Rica, you're racist.
That's right.
And Rachel Maddow nodded along.
Yeah, if you disapprove of hiring someone so that they can treat you to fancy hotels and vacations, you're a racist. Got it.
She also called Congressman Jim Jordan, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee's attempt to look into her misuse, allegedly, of $500,000 of taxpayer funds for a federal program that she's supposed to be overseeing. That's also Jim Jordan trying to interfere in a criminal prosecution of Donald Trump. So we'll see how that goes as well. It's 7:53.